So in this module of our Data Studio course, I want to cover something a little different, actually show you some live examples from inside of Data Studio. And give you examples of the main types of chart that you're probably going to use in most of your reports. There are a lot of different options, but I want to sort of dig into the most useful. So the first is the time series. So as it would suggest, given the name, you're usually going to use this when a date range is involved, and showing trends over time is essentially what you want to do with this one. Let's cover this. This one down the bottom here is a scorecard. Actually, I'm going to flick through them all fairly quickly just so you have the overview, and then we'll come back and dig into a bit more detail. So this one here is the scorecard. If we go to the next page, a bar chart, which I think you're probably familiar with. We can have two options on here, or two metrics, I should say, and I'll show you different ways of styling that in a second. A stacked bar chart, which I've used here with impressions. So one of the first things I do when I'm looking at an account thinking about potential is to segment by top versus other. And what I'm really looking at is two things. One is the sort of rough proportion between Google and search partners, and you can see I haven't got a whole lot of control over how Google displays this. I've got search partners here and here, with Google Display sort of stuck in the middle of them. Let's have a try at changing that when we dig in a second. But if I'm looking at yellow and purple, the sum of yellow and purple versus the sum of blue and red, I get a rough idea of how much is going on search partners. There's hardly anything in this shopping campaign. Come down here, oh, there's a little bit of search partners here, but there's no search partners on brand, kind of normal. And then I'm also looking at the percentage difference between top and other, and getting a sort of an idea of what's the potential if we were to move these other impressions up to the top. So I think stacked bar is quite a nice one for that. The other one that's good for stacked bar is impression share, because obviously your three impression share numbers should add up to 100, or always will add up to 100 in terms of impression share, lost you to budget, lost you to rank. And so that's another one that's good for a stacked bar chart. Pie chart, again, we're all pretty familiar with a basic pie chart, what it is, what it looks like. Just so that you know what's possible inside of here. And then a table, you're going to use a lot of tables. So I'll go through some of the options for table. And then again, oh, that's another one that I was going to show in a different module. So let's go back to the time series. Obviously, one of the big benefits for Data Studio, we've covered this already, is that you can do this live. Now, I have not put the date picker on here because I'm picking an old date range so that I don't reveal too much about the client's data in here, because I don't want a competitor of my clients to get hold of this. But let's now have a look at what we can do, and I'm going to focus in this module just on the data side. I'll cover style in a separate module later on. So for time series, you've got a couple of options here. We've got a main time dimension, and then we've got a breakout dimension. So I can go and add another dimension into here. Let's just try campaign at random and see what happens to the data. Right, so now I've got time data by campaign. So you can then start to think about, okay, how might this be useful? What else would I want to chart trends in over time? What other dimensions might be useful? Let's have a look at conversion action name, because that seems like it would be good, but that doesn't work. And this is a little trick inside of Data Studio that once you know it, things make a ton of sense. But you have to go segment conversion type name. Not exactly intuitive, but once you know that segment conversion type name, then, you bugger. Let's try getting rid of clicks and stick conversions in there. There we go. Now we're better. So we've got transactions in blue, and then a couple of other conversion types. But that's really useful, and I'll show that in a different section later on, where we've actually created multiple charts, so you can chart each individual conversion separately. And if the scale needs to be changed, you simply put them on multiple charts. So you use the filter option at the bottom, to say just show me the transactions on this chart, and then a copy of that chart just show me the other conversion one by one. So breakdown dimension basically says show me multiple lines, and then you've got the option for a single metric. You can sort, fairly basic. Really, that's not going to help you an awful lot because the x-axis here isn't going to change. If I change that to that, all it's going to do is change the list across the top. And because I've got this set in my styling for a different color for each line, it's just going to therefore change the lines. Date range, as always, so all of these you'll see as we go through, you are generally going to stick to auto. There are a few times where you might use customs, but generally you're going to have the date range of the chart be the date range that applies to the page, if not the entire report. The main place where I've used that differently is where I've done some monthly stats. So for the most part, my report is generally going to be based on the date picker at the top, which is usually going to be, say, last month or last 30 days. But if I'm looking at monthly stats, then I will come in here and override that and say, set a date that covers, say, the last year. And so once or twice a year I may have to change that and slightly update that, but that's easy to do. And then the last bit, which we'll talk about in a separate module later on, are filters. So we're not going to worry about filters just yet. So that's all of the data types, and then of course you can see all the different chart types here. So I'm covering the main ones in terms of time series, bar, pie, table. I'm not going to dig deep into geo, scatter, bullet, and area charts. You may use them occasionally, but you don't need to worry about them when you're starting out, so I'm trying to keep this nice and simple. In terms of the scorecard, this is one that you're going to use a lot, and one that you will have seen on the scorecard metrics page. It's just a whole bunch of individual KPIs, essentially, and again, a KPI just being a number, an important number to us. Again, same main things there. You got a data source, a single metric, no dimensions for this, and a date range. That's all that you need to worry about. So moving on to the bar chart. So I've got here two metrics being displayed. You can see that, but it's pretty hard to see what's going on with conversions. So, I mean, again, I could do this as a line chart, but it's not really a trend over time. My x-axis isn't time. My x-axis is the dimension here, which is campaign, and then I've got conversions. Now if I go and add that back in, cost per conversion, again, you can see not really easy to see that. So the way to fix that, and really I should be talking about this in a separate module later on called styling, but we go into here and then have a double axis. So now my conversions are over here. It's probably going to help if I label some of these. Right axis title, there we go. So now we've got conversions on this axis, dark blue, cost per conversion over here, light blue. And if I wanted to make that a little bit easier to read, I can remove the box here for the single color. Stacked bars doesn't really make sense in this case because they're two different things. It doesn't make any sense. And I will go back to data and I'll worry about styling later on because that's going to be a separate thing. What else was I going to show you in here? So bar chart, so one dimension, multiple metrics, or 2 dimensions, 1 metric. You'll see if I get rid of the second metric here, a spot opens up here for another dimension. So if I've got 2 metrics, I can only have 1 dimension. Let's go pick something else in here. I don't know, randomly week, because that was in front of the mouse. And now you can see, okay, now my charts are going to get a little crazy, but you can start to do sort of all sorts of crazy visualizations now. And I can see, okay, for this week, this is what happened. Or, I can now see that the trend over time for that particular campaign. I'm not going to say whether that's a good or a bad visualization. I'm just trying to randomly pick something and show you that visualization. And again, you can do very, very basic sorting. I'll show you this one now as well, day of week, because this is a bar chart as well on a different one here. And the sorting here really doesn't work very well. Same inside the table. If I sort by day of week descending, it's actually, if you notice, it's alpha order. W, T, S, M, F. Day of week ascending is just going to get me the other way up, which really doesn't help a whole lot. Hopefully Google will fix that and allow us to sort by day of week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, etc. So that's one little sort of bug, if you like. Not really a bug, it's just that this data is text and therefore it sorts by alpha. And I couldn't figure out a way to tell it that this data was in date format because I couldn't find the right format for that. There may be a way. If someone knows a way, awesome, let me know. Where do we get to? Stacked bars, then I think we've... So, stacked bars, there we go. Oops. The way I got this, by the way, top versus other isn't in here, it's slot. Again, one of those not particularly well named, and once you just go in and play with the data, you'll figure this out. But slot is the top versus other. 2 dimensions, 1 metric in this particular case. And again, I've got a couple of sorting options there. Pie chart.